So we went out yesterday, went shooting, beat the hell out of the front end a little bit since we're gonna be swapping her out and everything. That steering rack down there needs a replacement, so got an email this morning. Bow! There we go. Got some parts. Still a couple more on order. I gotta check and see what actually came and what's still coming, but there's some love here. But went and played a little bit out in the snow to get to where we were shooting at. But see what kind of parts we got. Okay. Got all the necessities here. I got ball joints and tie rods in here. Got a new steering rack, which I received it and freaking FedEx dropped it. And the box was all mashed up. Look at that. They broke this plastic cap off. And all this like lubricant that they had inside of there leaked out all over the box. So I got a bloody busted box from them, but it's probably still gonna work. With all this coronavirus jangus going on, it's a little I don't want to try and send it back and get another one. It's kind of a pain in the ass, but and I got 2 CV axles, so we can replace those. The teardown manual, my toolbox, box of Modelos. It's Taco Tuesday, so I was feeling it. And I got my helper, so that way we can get this truck lifted up and the tires off and get started.
I'm the helper.
So I got this little baby jack. Hopefully it can work and get this thing lifted up. I also got some 2x6s sitting on that spare right there for the event that it doesn't reach. We can stack those up and get those done. So that's pretty much where we're at right now. So we'll get started and try and get these tires off real quick. All right, so we're jacked up, we're on stands. So what we're doing is the steering rack right there. We're doing the outer tie rods because the inner tie rods are getting replaced because they're inside of the steering rack, so outer tie rods will get replaced with it. We're gonna do ball joints, lowers, and uppers, and that nasty CV axle. Look at that thing. Gotta get the tires off. Let's get it in there. Look at that. I mean, it's still kicking. It's still doing a great job, but it's not obviously practical. So we're gonna replace all of that. So easiest way, what I'm thinking is pull the caliper, and then we're going to probably, I'm thinking bungee cord that up to the control arm maybe, or the frame, so that way we can swing it out of the way. These little brackets here. And then, so we'll swing the caliper up out of the way, which I might end up just doing brakes, depending. It doesn't seem like the rotors are too bad aside from the obvious rust, but the pads look like they're getting there. Hard to see them, but I don't know. They might be getting close. We'll see when it comes out. Looks like it's getting close. But yeah, like I said, swing the caliper up out of the way, disconnect the ball joints, and then it'll come right out. I gotta take the spacer off so I can get this cap off to get the axle nut off, so that way we can get that CV axle out of there. And then see how far we can get with this one side tonight. It's getting kind of dark. Well, not really dark, but it's Washington, so the sun's starting to stay out a little bit longer. So we'll see how far we can get here on this one side. See what's up. Those damn spacer bolts did not want to budge. Boy. So I had to put a breaker bar across the lugs, and then I had to prop it at an angle against the ground after soaking it in PV Blast, and then have my wife come out here and smash it with that mallet right there while I turned it with this other breaker bar to get them loose. But got both sides off. Those things were on there. And then now gotta get this cap off. There's like a little lip right there. You just stick like a flathead or something or a pry bar in there, pop that cap off, and it'll expose the axle nut. I already got this one off. So I started it with that flathead and then moved up to that pry bar, popped it off, and I don't know that I even have a combo or a socket that big, so I might have to rent some parts or something, so we'll see how that turns out. But I got everything else soaking in PV Blast just as a precaution here, because I'm assuming that all these other bolts are probably going to be very similar to them damn lug bolts for the spacers, so we'll see. But I'm going to go ahead and pop that cap off the other side and then start working the rest of this here. Alright, so upon further inspection and doing some research, upper ball joint, right? It's pressed into this post here that goes down, right? So to get it out, I am going to have to take my little jack, put it up underneath, raise the entire wheel hub assembly, because if you notice right now the post is resting on the spring because everything is extended with the shock and the weight of the hub and everything. So I have to raise it up, right, so it'll clear, and also to straighten this joint out, because if you look at my boot, it is finished completely here. I'm gonna have to loosen this up, not take the nut all the way off, take a hammer, smash the side, the face right here to bust it loose from the control arm, and then once it's out of the control arm, I'm gonna have to swing it out. I'll probably tie it off to the coil, to the spring, and then proceed to hit the top of this to knock it out of this post here because it's pressed in. And then I'm also going to have to go get a press from O'Reilly's or something, and so I can press the new joint back into this post after the fact. So that'll be a process there, but that's what we're looking at now, and that's the first place I want to start because I'm going to be banging on it to knock it out, which in turn could completely thrash the lower ball joint, which I am going to replace anyways, obviously. So I want to start there so I don't thrash the new ball joint on the lower, and then we'll get all that taken apart. So that's the process at which we're at now, and then we'll work the steering rack and the CV axle and then move to the other side. So I'm gonna let some more penetrant soak on all this stuff overnight, hit O'Reilly's on the way home tomorrow, and then continue on with where we're at right now. So I'm gonna take this as a stopping point for the night, just so I can let all these bolts and tie rods and everything else soak with penetrant. And I'll spray this guy with some PB Blast too, because I know that guy's torqued on there pretty good. And I'm also gonna probably have to see what kind of combos I have. I do have a big combo set here that a buddy of mine gave me. He said he'll never use these, so it goes pretty big, but they're all standard size. So see if any of them fit on there. See if any of these big ones fit on there. If they don't, then we'll see what happens. We got this big guy, but he's a little bit loose, and I don't like the size of the drive. It's a little baby drive. I feel like I'm gonna break my breaker bar just trying to break that loose, because I know that's torqued pretty high, like 400 something foot-pounds. So see where we're at, and then see how loose any of this stuff is tomorrow after the PB Blast is set for a little bit, and then yeah, we'll go from there. All right, it's a little windy today, but upper ball joint, right? Like I said, best way, loosen this top nut up real loose, keep it on there, and then from the bottom side, smack it with a hammer, a little sledgy guy. Like I said, I use the jack and raise this up a little bit so there's some room there. Smack this face with a hammer and it popped right up. And if you look, there's a snap ring right here that you got to take out before you knock this out. So I'm going to take the snap ring out, use the same sledge, and just fucking beat straight down on that ball joint so we can get it out of there. So that's that. Get this out real quick. Alright, so that axle nut was surprisingly easy to take off. I used that, what is this, a 36 socket that we had sitting here. It's probably a 35 socket actually when you're looking at it, because this is a little loose in there, but it actually just popped it right off, no problem. So I'm not mad about that. I'll probably get the right socket to put the new one on. But before we go any further, so I took the rotor and the caliper off, and caliper's hanging. Like I said, I bungeed it up to the UCA, the upper control arm, because I was trying to knock this out, which the fork we got is broken, but it's always trusty and it works. The handle broke off of it, but it does work still. And as I was knocking that, this started to fray quite a bit. It was pulling on the brake line. So I bent it up over here and hung it out of the way. There's not too much tension on it. It's just bending and old. So I'm gonna have to get some new brake lines here in the future, I'm sure, very soon. But before we go any further with this, the CV axle's pretty loose, and I don't want to accidentally pull it out and spill diff fluid everywhere. So I'm gonna drain the diff, and I'm not really gonna record that, but your diff here, you're looking at your front diff. Right here on the driver's side is that, what, like a 10 millimeter hex head? That's your drain plug for your diff. So if you're like me and you put your jack stand in the way, I might have to hold this up while it's draining, but I'll see how that goes, and then get this thing drained out so we can, and if you look right here, it's hard to see, but right there is a fill for it. It's just covered in gunk. So that's to drain your front diff. You're going to want to do that before you pull these axles out. Otherwise, you're going to have fluid everywhere. So definitely do that. That's what I'm going to do beforehand, before we go any further, so that way I don't lose any fluid all over the driveway, or at least minimize it, so that way we can keep moving forward without trying to make a mess. So that's what my goal is there. All right, for the upper ball joint, you got your probably busted boot if you're doing this job.
Almost there.
So you get that out of the way, you have a snap ring that goes right under that lip right there and holds the upper ball joint into this post, okay? So you should have a pair of snap ring pliers, which I don't, but I did get it with a screwdriver and a pair of needle nose in no time. It was simple. I just got the screwdriver up underneath the snap ring, pried at it, it jumped over the lip, and then I just pried all the way around, popped it off, the boot came off with it. So now we're gonna line this bad boy up and hopefully just hammer it straight out. And this is gonna destroy the lower ball joint. And yeah, so we'll knock that out, and then we'll take the lower ball joint off, so that way I'm just gonna pull this whole assembly off, this wheel hub assembly off, and then that way I can get the whole, have a lot of room for the CV axle. So I just have to disconnect that damn tie rod that is being a bitch to get out. So we'll get her out, but for now I'm gonna knock this guy out. Try and heat it up. Maybe that'll help. It's occasional. And that did the trick. Got her loose. Fair warning, that's gonna be hot. I don't know, sometimes you gotta say that for some people. But yeah, she's loose, we're good to go. Next step, lower ball joints. Axle is pretty much out because it's so toast now. Yes. Once that lower ball joint comes done, this whole wheel hub is gonna come out, and then we could do this axle swap on this side because I've already drained the fluid. Oh, by the way, if you're like me and you don't have, which by the way on the side there it was a 12 for the drain plug, on this side right here, that little 19 will drain it too. So that's how I drained it. Got the grill out of there, so yep. Let's keep moving. Alright, so got the wheel hub assembly off over there. First part of the axle out right there. Second part is there. I just did the 4 bolts from the lower ball joint to take that off, and this gives me a pretty good free rein of this lower ball joint, so I can just kind of play around and get it off without the wheel hub in the way, you know, like the dust pan and everything for the dust shield for the brakes and all that jingus. So, because this sits kind of low down there. So, and by the way, looking, my brakes don't look all that bad actually. I might just swap them anyways just because I'm in there, but it's still got a lot of pad left. I'm surprised. I don't know when the brakes were done on it last, but I mean, the rotors look good, like I said, aside from a little bit of rust, and those pads aren't all that bad, but I'll probably put new pads in it just because I'm in here, why not? But now I'm gonna pop that out, that part of the axle out, which from what I understand takes quite a bit of force, so that pry bar might come in handy. And then we'll move over to the other side and do the same thing. I'm not gonna videotape the other side, obviously. It's the same process, just the other side. So yeah, O'Reilly's today, and I got this set here for the ball joint press. So there you go, U-joint press set, ball joint U-joint press set, part number 67045. The other set you need is the 4-wheel drive ball joint adapter set, part number 67048. And it's just got these adapters to help you kind of double stack and clear the threads of the ball joint. So you can't rent this set unless you rent this set. It was like $200-something, but you know, you get your money back or whatever. And I'm definitely gonna go get my money back. Some tools I'll keep, like a compression tester I kept, it was in good shape, but this guy, it's been through it a little bit. Hopefully it works. The threads look like they're all right. I haven't really checked the threads on this guy yet. Those look alright too. Those are the parts you need. They don't have it at AutoZone, but they do have it at O'Reilly's from what I've understood looking at forums and stuff. So just, if you get the press set, this will definitely make it a little bit easier on you. Alright, for one, there's new versus old. Yikes. And then, alright, now we're on to pressing this thing in here. So looking at this little tool, it doesn't look like it's going to be necessarily long enough, even though it's from the 4-wheel drive adapter set. But from the ball joint press, it had this little guy too. And that'll fit over the shaft of the ball joint there. So I think I'm going to double stack this and then this on top. And that'll give me enough room to press it into there. First thing I'm going to do is take some of this grease up the inside of that post, so when we press it in, it goes in nice and smooth and doesn't rust all stuck to it. I'm sure it still will, but at least some kind of preservation, right? So we'll just hit it with a little bit of this grease, make it look all pretty in there. I already hit it with like a wire wheel on the inside, so that way it's all cleaned up too. And then we'll just press her on there. That adapter ended up being long enough, and that was a tough one. I had to have my wife put her foot on it from the opposite side, while I have my foot up on the C-clamp and using this super long pry bar to get that to turn and press in. But it's in and it's flush. I just have to put the snap ring on because there is a snap ring. So it came with the snap ring and it came with the cotter pin. Just got to put the snap ring on, which I don't have snap ring pliers, so this should be a fun experience with that, but I'll make it work. And then I'll put the lower ball joint on and just start kind of slapping it back together, I think. As far as the CV axle goes, I'll show you that here in a minute. It's pretty straightforward, but I'll show you where we're going with that one. Alright, lower ball joints are on, upper ball joints pressed in. I greased up with some moly grease on the lower, I guess, receiver spot where the ball joint sits, and the upper. Put some grease in there too. Tie rod's still hanging because it's attached to the inner tie rods in the steering rack, which is going to get replaced. I moved the caliper out of the way, so I have this whole open space to play with and get this all put together and mounted up. Before we stick this in though, I'm going to stick the axle in. So we're going to put some grease on these splines here, and we're going to make sure that, I don't know if you can see that, it's starting to get dark, but the snap ring and everything, the opening is facing up. I don't know why, but somehow it makes it easier. And then you just press this into the differential, push it in with your hand, and then once it's all set in there and good to go, we're gonna bring up the wheel hub on the other side, get the splines in lined up on that side. That way we can get everything lined up and pressed in and tightened up and cotter pins in, and then we could just do that rack and hook it back up later, you know, because without the tie rods, if the wheel hub's attached to the upper and lowers, it'll just pivot back and forth, and we could pivot it forward out of the way, do what we need to do with the tie rods, and then stick them up in the right here into the lower ball joint, the new ones, and then do our thing. So I'm gonna go ahead and press that CV axle into the differential, and then we'll keep it moving and put a little grease on it. You gotta put grease on it, it'll make things much easier Lubrication is always key. Alright, so the CV axle is in. I just lined up the splines, got them lined up and made sure that it was biting real good, twisting it. And then I took a rubber mallet, hit the end there, so rubber mallet so I don't mess the threads up. And kind of mashed it in until it was flush with the differential on the backside. And now we're gonna put the wheel hub back up and grease up these splines real quick. Grease up the splines in the hub and hopefully wrap this up before it gets too dark here. Alright, day 3. So same thing, same other side. Just a couple things that I wasn't sure I remembered if I said previously, but when I'm getting the upper ball joint out of the upper control arm, I put the lower ball joint on the jack and lift it up, so that way it gives it room to get away from the shock, because it rubs on it when everything's extended out, at least on mine, because I think the lift. And then the next thing I was doing was the ABS sensor, the analog brake sensor right there. I just undid it and kind of put it up out of the way, so that way it's not stretching on the cable for it, the cord, the wire. And then same deal with the calipers, bungee cord up to the frame out of the way, and then same deal. So like I said, I'm not gonna probably record this other side. It's the exact same thing. Bust the ball joint out with a hammer, take the nut off, knock the tie rod loose, undo the lower, and then break it all loose. And then I'll start recording again when I get to the steering rack there. All right, cool. All right, so now that this side is completely torn down, I don't necessarily want to put it back together just yet. For one, I got a buddy coming to help me press the upper ball joint into there. For two, I kind of want the room here, because I was watching another guy. You probably, if you're watching about 3rd gen 4runners, you know Timmy the Tool Man. And I was watching his video. He's got a video on how he swapped this rack out. It looks like I got about the same clearance that he had. But anyway, let's get up under here. You got a bracket there with a bushing. You got this bolt that runs through the frame there, and then you have this guy that runs up, and this is a welded nut. So this one goes straight up, and you got to take it from the top with a breaker bar or something. Then you have your steering linkage there that you have to disconnect, and then the lines for the power steering, which is right there. Focus, there we go. There's 2 lines right there on the forward side of it. So you got 2 lines right here. He said the best way is to disconnect everything from down here, right? And then give yourself some room to be able to pull the rack out a little bit, so you have some room on those lines. And then those 2 bolts, there's one here and one here to loosen up. So first I gotta tie the steering wheel down. Alright, so we got the new rack up. Jack stands up off the ground. It was off stand, but we're good now. We put it back up on jack stands though, so we can bleed the system. So to bleed the system, you got to get the truck running to operating temp. Make sure you got enough fluid in your reservoir now, which I did. And then while it's on jack stands, just run the wheel over all the way to lock, and then back to the other side, all the way to lock. And just keep doing that. 10 or 12 times, and then just keep checking your fluid back and forth. Make sure you got enough fluid in your system. Pretty bubbly with all the air. Once you're done, give it up in the air, put it on the ground and run it back and forth same way, lock to lock, to bleed the power steering system. It sounds terrible, but once all that air is out, it won't sound like that anymore. You can see it's pretty bubbly in there. That's just going to work all the air out of your system and up to the top. And you just keep checking it periodically to make sure that your level is still pretty good. That's pretty good. It's bubbly though. Alright, I'm testing it. The steering wheel's pretty straight. I'm cruising. Everything seems to be alright. I'll explain how we did the steering wheel linkage here in a minute. It's pretty simple, but everything seems to be working alright. Just gotta go get an alignment now that I can actually do it. Still think it needs to be bled a little bit, the power steering. Might even do a new power steering pump here in the future, but for now it's working. But I'll get this thing parked and then we'll explain how we did the the steering alignment and everything along those lines. So just give me a minute here, I'll show you. Alright, so next and last step, after everything's all hooked up and good to go, gotta fill the diff back up. And got one of these little pumps and just pump it in there and it feeds it through. See if I can do this one-handed. Just pump it into the diff. It's pretty easy. And just a 10 on the side there. It's a 10 mil Allen. Tighten your drain plug real good. Open up the 10 and then fill it till it's at that level. It's good to go. And that's what you're looking for. Just fill it until it starts leaking out the fill plug and it's full. Tighten it up and then wipe that stuff down. And that's diff fluid. Alright, we just got back from the Les Schwab getting the alignment. Said I would explain some linkage and things like that to you, so I haven't forgotten. First things first, for your caliper, right? I had it tight on the frame over there. I hooked up the post, but the caliper was still tight on, so I hooked up the upper ball joint and then realized that I needed to get the caliper over because the caliper is on the front side. So I had to get it, you see the line runs behind it with the bracket and everything. So I had to disconnect and then swing out the post, get the caliper on the other side, connect it, and then get the caliper all hooked up. So that was one thing that we screwed up on there, but that's that. You saw the video I showed on how we tied down the steering wheel. I just used ratchet strap and hooked the ratchet strap in here and then wrapped it around the frame of the seat and tied it off tight on one side and then tight on the other side so that the steering wheel would sit straight. After that, had the wheels straight, had the steering wheel straight, and we came underneath the truck to the linkage there. And like I said, there's those two bolts. So there's one and there's the other one. Okay, you gotta take those two bolts out, loosen up this little clamp, the bolt right here on the clamp, and then it was actually kind of a pain in the ass for mine, but maybe not for yours. Maybe ahead of time soak it with PV Blast on these like teeth right here. But you'll slide this up this piece up, so you'll give room for these posts to clear it. And then, like I said, you'll disconnect this bolt here that runs through. I didn't take the bolt out of the frame, I left it there so that way I had something it would rest on. Take these two out, watch the bushing. It's a $50 bushing. You don't want to buy another bushing, so be careful with the bushing. And then the bolt here, and like I said, you'll get some room to slide it towards you so you can disconnect the lines and get it done that way. And then once the steering rack is up, you'll want to tighten this guy first and this bracket first. That way this bolt will line up, because if you are trying to get this one first, you're gonna have a hell of a time. But if you tighten this guy down and tighten that bracket down, it'll put it in place where it needs to be, and then this will line up perfectly. And then slide your linkage down and make sure everything's good to go. Next thing too is this piece here, the bottom piece, it doesn't come on the rack, so you'll have to swap it over, which that was kind of a pain in the butt to get off of the old rack, but it eventually came off. I don't think I have anything else that I forgot to tell you guys, so I think that's all of it. But yeah, you pretty much all you gotta do. And then I went and got the alignment. It was like $98 at Les Schwab, and got it all aligned, and now she's good to go. So no more death wobble, no more loose steering linkage. And I did notice, just driving it from Les Schwab to O'Reilly's on the freeway to turn that press back in and get my money back, I did notice that I'm not jumping into grooves and things like that. The tires aren't wanting to jump over anymore, because that steering rack is nice and solid now. It's nice and new. So that's pretty much gonna wrap up this video. Just a couple things. Like I said, don't forget to move your caliper. If you hang it on this side, don't forget to swing it back over before you hook up the upper ball joint. And don't forget your diff fluid. I almost did. I went and towed there's a storage lot around the corner. I went and got my boat and towed it back, and that's when I realized, oh crap, I don't even have diff fluid in the front. So it's not going to do nothing if you just drive, you know, less than a mile away and a mile back, but you forget for a couple weeks or whatever, it's going to tear it up. So don't forget about that. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I hope this helps anybody trying to swap out a steering rack and ball joints and all that stuff. So thanks.